The writer of a comic was a CIA operative in Iraq, and he writes a story about how the mastermind of a genocide can be reformed. What should we actually take away from that story? Yesterday I talked about the ending of Supergirl versus the ending of Woman of Tomorrow. Now I'd like to talk about Tom King and the concept of no-kill rules in comics. King was an intern with both DC and Marvel in the late 90s, ended up going to Columbia for both philosophy and history. After 9/11, he joined the CIA's counterterrorism division. Tom would end up operational in Iraq, but before that, this is what he was doing by his own words.
They worked on the Iraq War when it was just sort of when they were planning it, when they were sort of planning the invasion, like a skeleton crew. It was like two of us and another guy and another older person. If the older person didn't show up, and he was not the most reliable person, he was kind of an old drunk. It would just be it would be me. It'd be two. I was 22 at the time, in charge of the fucking Iraq invasion, which was ridiculous. The Iraq War started 2 days early. They invaded 2 days early. Because they thought they could find where Saddam was. And so I came to work that day, and there's George Tenet, who's running the war, and he's sitting literally in my chair. And I was like, oh, hi, Mr. Tenet, or whatever, So I was like, you can have my chair. And he's got a big, George, he was famous because he always have an unlit cigar in his mouth. He had a big unlit cigar in his mouth. And he's like, wait, start, they were very proud of this awful thing they were about to do.
Wow. Talking about George Tenet, that was the director of the CIA under George Bush. This was the mastermind of the torture campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in Iraq, the largest torture facility was Abu Ghraib. In Afghanistan, it was Bagram. Obviously, there was Guantanamo Bay. In these facilities, Americans did essentially anything you can possibly think of to individuals they could basically hold for an unlimited amount of time, whether they were innocent or guilty. George Tenet was also pivotal in actually pushing us into the war in Iraq. George helped put together something called a National Intelligence Estimate on the WMDs in Iraq. He presented this to Bush, to the Senate Intelligence Committee. He initially called the WMD case in Iraq a slam dunk. In 2004, it came out that the key findings in his report were either, quote, overstated or not supported by actual intelligence. If you have some time on your hands, go dive into the entire WMD rabbit hole. There's a lot to learn there. I do want to note in that clip that Tom King said what they were planning in retrospect was absolutely terrible. I will also acknowledge that after 9/11 in America, people got very much swept up in the idea of patriotism and the idea of we are under attack, we have to fight back. All this bullshit that was fed to us. Tom King would spend 7 years in the CIA, depending on what research you look at. Between 250,000 and 1 million Iraqi civilians would be killed in that war. This is a war that was seemingly based on imaginary intelligence that people like Tom King, by his own words, were behind. When you think about this amount of guilt, I think it's impossible for that to not work its way into this man's writing. Brings me to Woman of Tomorrow with Krem of the Yellow Hills, who's basically a prisoner that the brigands come upon, and they free him on a condition. The condition is, in Maypole, he helps to organize a genocide against the minority population. Gets him into the brigands, and then he goes around the galaxy, around the universe, committing other acts of genocide against peaceful people. He's not a superpowered being with the strength of 1,000 men. He's just a regular man with a bow and arrow and a sword, and I think that makes him all the more terrifying. A guy who's able to use a bit of magic that comes from the amount of death that he has inflicted. The heroes have a chance to kill him. Enough killing has been done. Then he goes to the Phantom Zone, and he comes back an old man that is changed and completely reformed. The thing is, I don't think there's actually a path from genocidal murdering psychopath to reform. Heroes like Kara are supposed to see this and still have that goodness, right? Still have their no-kill rule. The character with a no-kill rule is a character Tom King has also written. I have not read his Batman, but he has written Batman stories. To hear from someone who's read his Batman about how it is. I love Batman as a character, but the thing with Batman that's been well discussed is his no-kill rule only benefits him. It does not actually benefit the city. Man fights a rogue gallery that entirely reflects him in a dark and twisted way. I made a long video on this before. He sees himself in all of these people. He believes perhaps they could be reformed. He sends them off to Arkham, where they break free and cause more pain and chaos and death in Gotham. That is the Batman cycle, and it does not make Batman good or moral. He's just getting more people hurt at the end of the day. It is a net negative. But the reality is, sometimes in these stories, characters are just so evil, so beyond the pale, that they just need to be gone, and it's okay for our heroes to do that.